There are a few ways to set up the lunch deductions. The first way is to set up a automatic deduction after a certain amount of hours worked. The second way is to allow the employees to scan for lunch, but force a minimum deduction if no lunch is taken. The third way is to allow employees to scan for lunch, force a minimum deduction, but do not force an auto deduction. And the final way is to not set up any parameters and just allow the employees to clock in and clock out for lunch, and the lunch deduction will be whatever the time frame is between the in scan and the out scan. First, we'll take a look at how to set up an automatic lunch deduction. For this, we go into our setup and time calculation rules. We'll take our standard rule, and here we're going to go to the tab daily deductions and additions. Then we turn on, do you want to automatically deduct time from shifts? How long does an employee have to work for the auto deduction to occur? Here we'll enter 5.5 hours, and then we'll enter in the lunch deduction, which will be 30 minutes. Now we'll go into someone's time card and we'll take a look at how this actually works. On Tuesday, we have a time record showing an in punch at 8 a.m., out punch at 12 p.m. Total hours, 4. Paid hours, 4. So here we can see no lunch deduction is happening. If we increase this here to 2 p.m., this will be a total of 6 hours. We can see here the total time is now 6 hours. Paid time is 5.5. So it's now taking into account the automatic deduction after 5.5 hours. The next way to set up a lunch deduction is in the shift. To be able to do lunch deductions in the shift, you will need to first verify that Shift Lunch Rules is enabled. To do this, we go to Utilities, Customize Software, and then here we need this checkbox on, Shift Lunch Rules. If you had to turn it on, then you'll need to log off of Employee Tracker and log back in. Next, go to your shifts, pick the shift you want to define the lunch deduction in, edit the shift, and then save the shift. Once you save the shift, you'll be prompted with the Shift Lunch Rules window. Setting up the lunch deduction in the shift is ideal if you want to have your employees scanning for lunch. In here, we can either set it to only deduct if they clock out, deduct a minimum amount if they do clock out, and also set up an automatic deduction if no lunch break occurs. So first we have our lunch start and lunch stop time. This we just want to match the start time of the shift. Otherwise, this will be expecting a lunch scan to happen at a particular time in the day. And if they don't scan at that time, then the deductions are not going to work correctly. Entering in the shift times allows the lunch to happen at any time in the day. Then we have our lunch start and stop rounding. This will round the lunch to the quarter hour, which is our standard setup with a grace of 7. If you want to have no rounding, then just set the lunch start rounding to 0 and lunch stop rounding to 0. Next, we have the minimum lunch duration. The minimum lunch duration will force the scanned lunch to be at least 30 minutes. For example, if someone clocked out for lunch from 12:40 to 1 p.m., 20 minutes, this total time deducted would be forced to be 30 minutes instead of 20. This minimum lunch duration also comes into play when we enable the auto deduct if no scan is taken. This works the same as the time calculation rule. We just simply enter how many elapsed hours before the auto deduction occurs. So we'll put in here 5.5. So with this current setup, they can take lunch at any time. If they do scan, it will force the scan to be at least 30 minutes deduction. If they do not scan at all, it will force the deduction. And now we will see how this works. Now we're going to see that the lunch being taken off is only 30 minutes. Now we have a record showing an employee scanning out for lunch using the Shift Lunch Rule settings. You can see that between 12 and 12:30 a lunch did occur, and it's not deducting an extra 30 minutes. It's correctly calculating the total paid time of 7.5 hours. We can see the minimum lunch duration being enforced here. If we set the lunch to end at 12:20, we can see here that total time is 7:40, but it's forcing the paid time to be 7.5. And we can switch this back to being auto deduct only. We'll take out that lunch scan, put in 5 p.m. And now even though there is no lunch deduction happening, it's still deducting the 7.5. And the final way of setting up lunch deductions is to have no automatic calculations or deductions or any fancy stuff. And you just simply allow the employees to clock in and out for lunch and deduct whatever that time is. So as far as settings are concerned, in the rules, the automatic deduction settings would be unchecked. In our shift lunch rules, we would have a 0-minute minimum duration, and we would have our auto deduction unchecked, and we would switch the rounding to be 0, 0, 0 on all the rounding settings. And this will simply deduct the lunch that is scanned. So if they scan out for 15 minutes, it'll deduct 15. If they scan out for 16, it'll deduct 16, and so on and so forth. So here we'll enter when the person left for lunch. Then we'll enter when they returned from lunch. And we can see here the total time is 7 hours and 35 minutes, which reflects the 25 minutes that this person clocked out for. If they hadn't clocked out, it would have been an 8-hour shift.